بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Apologies for the slight delay in starting. We have a couple, well, I guess as you can see, I don't have a microphone to speak through. But since there's not many of us in the room, can everybody hear me clearly, inshallah? So, okay, alhamdulillah. And then my tablet decided to give me a hard time, so alhamdulillah, very interesting start. Khair, inshallah. So we will continue. So we started on the miracle of Al-Isra and Al-Mir'aj last week. We mentioned how it began. We talked about things as such as when did it take place, and was it actually a physical or a spiritual? Like did he dream about it, or did it actually take place? Right. This was the difference we mentioned in the scholars. We mentioned how the events that led up from taking him from his house to the Kaaba, having his chest opened by Jibreel alayhi salam, and then riding the Al-Buraq to Bayt al-Maqdis, and then praying in the Masjid there, and we mentioned the description, some of the descriptions of the prophets that he saw there, and as I mentioned, Isra Mir'aj has so many different narrators. We don't have one single narration that combines it, but alhamdulillah, the majority of them, or a lot of them, are authentic, and for the most part, I'm going to be using authentic narrations unless I say otherwise. And we mentioned that he went up in the heavens one after the other, and in each of the heavens, there was a series of events going on, namely knocking on the gate of the heaven, and then getting the permission, entering, and then greeting the prophet who was sent there to greet Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Right. So we mentioned who actually remembers the order without cheating. Cheating. Adam. Okay. Okay. Yusuf. Allah barik. Very good. I'm sure you were going to say the same. Yes, so this was the order. And as I mentioned last week, this order is found in one of the authentic hadith. But in other authentic hadith, they say, these are the prophets that he saw, but we don't know what the order is. So Allahu a'lam. But either way, that's the order we're going to go through. So now, there appear to be a few conversations that took place between Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and the other prophets. And again, as I'll bring in again this point, that the issue is that we don't know exactly when these events took place. Is it as he is going up and then they have these conversations, or is it later on he came down again and he saw the prophets again and they had a conversation? Allahu a'lam. So, and again, different scholars say different things. But either way, there is an authentic narration by Ibn Mas'ud in Sunan Ibn Majah. He says, لما كان ليلة أسري برسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لقي إبراهيم وموسى وعيسى فتذاكروا الساعة. That Prophet Muhammad صلى الله عليه وسلم, when he went on the Isra and Mir'aj, he met Ibrahim and he met Musa and Isa alayhim salam. We spoke about that last week. But then he mentions that they began talking about the day of judgment. So فبدأوا بإبراهيم فسألوه عنها فلم يكن عنده منها علم. They asked Ibrahim alayhi salam, what do you know about the day of judgment? Ibrahim says, I don't know anything about the day of judgment. Then ثم سألوا موسى فلم يكن عنده منها علم. They ask Musa, what do you know about the day of judgment? He says, I don't know anything. فرد الحديث إلى عيسى بن مريم. Now it's Prophet Isa's alayhi salam's turn. فقال قد عهد إلي فيما دون وجبتها فأما وجبتها فلا يعلمها إلا الله. So he says, now he gives us a detail. He says, as for me, I have been assigned a task that relates to the day of judgment, i.e. a sign of the day of judgment. There's a sign of the day of judgment that's associated with me, but when will that sign take place? I don't know. Okay, this is ilm al-ghayb, of course. Nobody knows when the day of judgment is. فذكر خروج الدجال قال فأنزل فأقتله فيرجع الناس إلى بلادهم. He mentions that Dajjal shall appear. Well, of course, there's many hadith about Dajjal. This is one of them. And this is Isa alayhi salam himself narrating this to us, or informing us about this. That he will appear, and I shall descend back down. because we know in the Quran, Prophet Isa alayhi salam, he's not dead. He's not been killed. He was raised up. So he says, I will descend back down and I shall kill Dajjal. And so people will return back to their lands and their countries and whatnot. فَيَسْتَقْبِلُهُمْ يَأْجُوجُ وَمَأْجُوجُ وَهُمْ مِنْ كُلِّ حَدَبٍ يَنْسِلُونَ. Then, once people return back to their land, Ya'juj and Ma'juj shall appear, and they will come forth from basically every single direction. من كل حدب ينسير. From every valley and from every direction they will appear. فلا يمرون بماء إلا شربوه ولا بشيء إلا أفسدوه. They will not pass by any body of water except they will drink all of it. So they're very large in number. Like you would have a lake, okay? You will have, I don't know, Glenmore Reservoir. I don't know, you kind of call it a lake. Lake Ontario, okay, that's a better example maybe. All of Ya'juj and Ma'juj would pass by that one lake, they would drink all of it. There's no Lake Ontario anymore, okay? And nothing do they pass by except that they cause corruption and destruction. They will wreak havoc in the land. فَأَدْعُ اللَّهَ أَنْ يُمِيتَهُمْ فَتَنْتُنُ الْأَرْضُ مِنْ رِيحِهِمْ. And so I will make it, this is Isa saying, I will then make a dua to Allah Azza wa Jal for him to deal with Ya'juj and Ma'juj, to get rid of them. And so Allah will destroy them. He will get rid of them. But now the world will suffer from the stench of their decomposed bodies. Because there's a lot of them, and obviously they're out in the surface, they're not buried. So the world will stink because of their dead bodies. So once again, فَأَدْعُ اللَّهَ فَيُرْسِلُ السَّمَاءَ بِالْمَاءِ فَيَحْمِلُهُمْ فَيُلْقِيهِمْ فِي الْبَحْرِ. So once again, I will make a dua to Allah at that point, and He will send down forth rain that will wash away their bodies into the sea. ثم تنسف الجبال وتمد الأرض مد الأديم فعهد إلي متى كان ذلك كانت الساعة من الناس. كانت الساعة من الناس. So he's saying, then at some point close to this, the mountains will turn to dust, the earth will be stretched out, okay, it will be flattened. فعهد إلي متى كان ذلك كانت الساعة من الناس كالحامل التي لا يدري أهلها متى تفجأهم بولادتها. At that point in time, once people see these events, mountains are being turned to dust, earth is being flattened, then I have been told and promised. So again, he says, I don't know what's going to happen. But when that happens, the day of judgment is like the example of a pregnant woman who is just about to give birth. And you know how like the family is gathering around. They don't know when is it going to come. Is it now? Is it going to be in a few hours? It can happen at any moment now. So this is the description that he uses. So this is a detail about the day of judgment that we have been given by Prophet Isa alayhi salam. There appears to also have been another conversation that happened. This hadith is a very famous hadith. Probably all of us actually have heard this. And it is a Hasan hadith in Sunan at-Tirmidhi. However, some scholars, so it is classified as gharib, and some scholars classify it as weak as well. Do you guys learn what a gharib hadith is in the, what is it? Okay, quick question. One rawi, only, one narrator. Okay? So, and this is the famous hadith. So, some scholars have weakened it, but inshallah there's no harm in mentioning it. In fact, there's more benefit than harm in mentioning it. And that is the narration by Ibn Mas'ud where he says, لَقِيتُ إِبْرَاهِيمَ لَيْلَةَ أُسْرِيَ بِي. So now he's saying, it's a narration about Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam. فَقَالْ يَا مُحَمَّدْ أَقْرِئْ أُمَّتَكَ مِنِّي السَّلَامِ. Now you know the hadith. Give salam on my behalf to your ummah. We've all heard this hadith before. وَأَخْبِرْهُمْ أَنَّ الْجَنَّةَ طَيِّبَةُ التُّرْبَةِ عَذْبَةُ الْمَاءِ. Inform them, tell them, I've seen Jannah. Jannah's soil is very fertile, and the water there is sweet, and the land is very luscious. وَأَنَّهَا قِيعَانٌ. But however, it is a flat land. It's a barren land. It's empty. There's nothing in it. You need to plant it. So what does he say? وَأَنَّ غِرَاسَهَا Finish the hadith. What is the ghiras of the Jannah? Subhanallah, walhamdulillah, wa la ilaha illallah, wallahu akbar. This is the famous hadith. So we've been taught that someone who says these adhkar and repeats it, Subhanallah, alhamdulillah, wa la ilaha illallah, Allahu Akbar, inshallah there is an angel in the Jannah who will plant a tree for you. So if you repeat that a million times, inshallah you get a million trees planted for you in Jannah. So it is, Allahu Alam, some scholars classify it as okay, Hasan, some classify it as a little bit weaker, but inshallah repeat these adhkar with the hopes that inshallah you'll be granted trees in your Jannah. Then the narration continues. Now we're back to the authentic hadith. ثُمَّ رُفِعْتُ إِلَى سِدْرَةِ الْمُنْتَهَى. So now he's saying, I've continued now beyond the seventh heaven. So he was already in the seventh heaven, but he says, I continued above this, and until they reached an area that is called Sidratul Muntaha. Now Sidratul Muntaha is referenced in the Quran. What is Sidratul Muntaha? In fact, what is Sidra in the first place? Sidra is coming from the word sidr. There's a shajara, a kind of tree called sidr. In English, I think they call it the lot tree. You can Google it, lot tree. It's like a tall, and branches are very wide. Okay, and it has fruits in it. It's a tree that grows in the desert, and it was well known to the Arabs, and the fruits are very sweet and delicious. So this is what sidra is. Muntaha means at the very end, meaning that's the end. Khalas, there's nothing beyond it. There is no Sidratul Muntaha is literally at the end. There is nothing beyond it. There is no creation beyond Sidratul Muntaha or above it. Only Allah Azza wa Jal is above Sidratul Muntaha. Now, some ahadith have a little bit of a difference. Some of them mention that Sidratul Muntaha is in the sixth heaven, and some of them say it is actually in the seventh heaven. So how do you reconcile? Very simple. What appears to be the case is that the Sidratul Muntaha is a very large tree. We're going to mention the description. That Allahu Alam, the trunk begins in the sixth heaven, and it continues up to the seventh heaven. Okay? And so Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, now he gives us descriptions, and he says, فَإِذَا نَبَقُهَا مِثْلَ قِلَالِ هَجَرٍ. The fruits of this tree were as large as the barrels or the jugs of a tribe called Hajar. Now, of course, what is the tribe of Hajar, and what do their barrels look like? And we don't know. What do their jugs look like? We don't know. But we can imagine he's describing it to the Sahaba. He's, again, saying descriptions which the Sahaba would understand. So he's probably telling them like it's some very large fruits hanging from this tree, and they were like the barrels of Hajar. وَإِذَا وَرَقَهَا مِثْلُ آذَانِ الْفِيَلَةِ. And the leaves of this tree look the same as the ears of the elephant. So you know the elephant, and the ears, big, flappy, thin ears. That's the leaf. That's like this is the description of the leaf of the Sidratul Muntaha. In a different narration, he also says, فَغَشِيَهَا أَلْوَانٌ لَا أَدْرِي مَا هِي. I saw the Sidra, I saw this tree, and I saw that it was covered up with all kinds of colors that I cannot describe to you. So that's a very interesting thing to say. What does that imply? That implies that there are colors beyond what we know. We are only given a small spectrum of colors, the colors of the rainbow that we are able to see. But in reality, there are colors that, Allahu A'lam, they're beyond our knowledge, and Prophet Muhammad ﷺ does not know how to describe them. And he says that the tree kept on changing until you cannot really describe it with something, with just a phrase or a word or something. Meaning, the Sidratul Muntaha appears to be a dynamic creation. It's not a static creation. It's not a static description. Like for me, when I tell you, do you know what a tree looks like? All of you will now get a picture of a tree on your head. Okay, yes, it has a big, large bark, and then branches branching out, and then it has green leaves, right? This is the image of a tree that we all think about. Sidratul Muntaha is different. It keeps changing and changing and changing, and has colors going up and down and things covering it and things going around it until Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he says, I can't describe it to you. And it is a very massive tree that a person could walk in its shade for 70 years, or in another narration, 100 years, and he would still not be able to cross it. So he says, يسير الراكب في ظلها 70 عاما لا يقطعها. And of course, this is we're not given descriptions. We know very little overall about Sidratul Muntaha. What is this mysterious tree? And even the Quran references it. إِذْ يَغْشَى السِّدْرَةَ مَا يَغْشَى. So even the Quran, it's as if Allah Azza wa Jalla is purposely hiding the details. When the Sidra was covered with whatever it was covered with. So even Allah Azza wa Jalla does not give you the description of Sidratul Muntaha, as if, subhanAllah, it's being saved as a surprise. And all we really know is Sidratul Muntaha was the last thing that Prophet Muhammad saw before he ascended even further so he could meet with Allah Azza wa Jal. We do have another detail from Ibn Mas'ud in Sahih Muslim. He says, إِلَيْهَا يَنْتَهِي مَا يَعْرُجُ بِهِ مِنَ الْأَرْضِ فيقبض منها وإليها ينتهي ما يهبط به من فوقها فيقبض منها. So everything that goes up from earth is absorbed by Sidratul Muntaha. There's nothing. It continues to go up, and then it reaches Sidratul Muntaha, and then there's nothing above it. And then everything that is sent down to earth begins with Sidratul Muntaha and descends down. Now, what does this mean? We all know that there are certain things that ascend up and certain things descend down. Who can give me like examples? What is something that descends up? The ruh, okay. What else? Dua, right? When you make dua to Allah Azza wa Jal, prayers are raised to Allah Azza wa Jal, good deeds, right? وَالْعَمَلُ الصَّالِحُ يَرْفَعُهُ, right, in the Quran, that the good deeds are raised up. And what descends down, things like rahmah, things like rain descend down. So all of these begin and they end at Sidratul Muntaha. And Prophet Muhammad also told us that in at Sidratul Muntaha, there are certain insects that are made out of all sorts of colors and made out of gold. فيها فراش الذهب. And looking at this tree, Allah Azza wa Jalla says in the Quran, لَقَدْ رَأَى مِنْ آيَاتِ رَبِّهِ الْكُبْرَى, that he has seen one of Allah Azza wa Jalla's major signs. This is like a huge, big ayah. And so subhanAllah, if Allah Azza wa Jalla himself is calling Sidratul Muntaha a major ayah, then how can we start to imagine what's even bigger than Sidratul Muntaha? And also, we're given a detail, this is also in the authentic hadith. فَإِذَا أَرْبَعَةُ أَنْهَارٍ. He says, I saw 4 rivers coming down from Sidratul Muntaha. نَهْرَانِ بَاطِنَانِ وَنَهْرَانِ ظَاهِرَانِ. 2 rivers were visible to me, and 2 rivers I was not able to see. And so I asked Jibreel, O Jibreel, what are these rivers? And so he says, أَمَّا الْبَاطِنَانِ فَنَهْرَانِ فِي الْجَنَّةِ وَأَمَّا الظَّاهِرَانِ فَالنِّيلُ وَالْفُرَاتِ. As for the 2 rivers which are hidden, those are rivers of Jannah. And as for the 2 rivers that are visible, those are the Nile River and the Euphrates River. Now, what does this really mean? So some scholars, they say that this literally means that the same Nile River that today we see and the same Euphrates River that we have, somehow through the ability of Allah Azza wa Jal, the source is up there. That's one opinion of one scholar. However, some scholars said that that's not what it really means. It just means that there are blessed rivers. And whether you want to take this or that, we don't really know what it means. We just simply know that he saw 4 rivers, and 2 of them are An-Nil al-Furat. And subhanAllah, even as we look at the Nile River and the Euphrates River throughout history, we find that civilization has always thrived around these rivers. Whether it is the Nile River, which you have the kingdom of Fir'aun and just the Fara'in and the pharaohs, right? And the kingdom of Abyssinia as well. And you have on the Euphrates River, you have Babylon and Mesopotamia and all of these different civilizations that came in the past, these massive and powerful civilizations. All of them were stationed around those rivers. And also, we know from different ahadith, from different ahadith, that Prophet Muhammad ﷺ saw Jibreel in his original form again. And so we know it from the ahadith, from many different ahadith, that Prophet Muhammad ﷺ saw Jibreel in his original form twice. The first time was when? Ghar Hira. The first time when Jibreel came down for the first revelation. That was the first time. Then the second time is now happening right now during Al-Mir'aj. In a hadith narrated by Ibn Habban from Ibn Mas'ud, he says, رَأَيْتُ جِبْرِيل, Prophet Muhammad is saying, رَأَيْتُ جِبْرِيل عليه السلام عند سدرة المنتهى. I saw Jibreel at Sidratul Muntaha, and he gives us a description. وَعَلَيْهِ 600 جناح. He has 600 wings. We know, of course, from the Quran, angels have wings, and they have different numbers according to their rank. So, جاء الملائكة رسلا أولي أجنحة مثنى وثلاث ورباع. Some angels have 2 wings, some angels have 3 wings, some angels have 4 wings, depending basically on their rank. And then you have Jibreel, the leader of all the angels, and he has 600 wings. And we know, of course, from the narration of the Ghar Hira that he is very massive. Sadd al-Ufuq, he has blocked the horizon from how massive he was. And he tells us here in this hadith, يُنْثَرُ مِنْ رِيشِهِ تَهَاوِيلُ الدُّرِّ وَالْيَاقُوتِ, that from the feathers of Jibreel's wings, there were pearls and corals that were dripping. So subhanAllah, even Jibreel alayhi salam, he himself, he does not appear to be a static creation. You cannot just describe him as, oh, he had a white feathery wings. No. It seems that also his creation appears to change, kind of similar in a way to Sidratul Muntaha. Then Prophet Muhammad ﷺ says, ثُمَّ عُرِجَ بِي حَتَّى ظَهَرْتُ لِمُسْتَوَى أَسْمَعُ فِيهِ صَرِيفَ الْأَقْلَامِ. At this point, I was ascended. Now notice the language here. He didn't say Jibreel took me up. He says, I was ascended until I reached a certain level. Meaning, from this point on, Jibreel is not with him. Jibreel is no longer ascending. Khalas, Jibreel has reached a place where even Jibreel alayhi salam is not allowed to ascend. And only now Prophet ﷺ is being ascended by the ability of Allah Azza wa Jal. Until I arrived at a level where I could hear the writing of the pen. Now, what is the pen and who is writing it? We do know from different narrations that are found in books, the first thing that Allah Azza wa Jal created is the pen. That's the first thing that Allah Azza wa Jal created. And Allah Azza wa Jal ordered the pen to go and write everything. Write the whole qadr, everything that will happen from start to the end. And so he says, I heard the writing of the pen. And of course, the pen is a creation of Allah Azza wa Jal. Allah Azza wa Jal, does not need to grab a pen and write with it. Allah Azza wa Jal can say, kun fayakun. The pen can write without a writer. Now, in reality, we don't really know anything about what is this pen and what is it writing really. And there's actually an interesting, it's not a contradiction, but it is a point that is brought up by, because if you go and read some of the authentic hadiths, for example, the hadith, for example, about احفظ الله يحفظك احفظ الله تجده تجاهك is a famous hadith. It ends with رفعت الأقلام وجفت الصحف. The pens have been raised and the books have dried, the ink has dried on the books. So now someone would bring that authentic narration and will bring this authentic narration. Like, it's writing over here, and in this hadith it's saying it's stopped writing and it's dried, like what's going on? Allahu A'lam. It's Allah, the book that is mentioned in the hadith where رُفِعَتِ الْأَقْلَامُ وَجَفَّتِ الصُّحُفُ is not the same book that he is hearing over here. And we do know, this is again a deep topic, that in the qadr comes in different types. There is al-qadr al-azali, there is a type of qadr which Allah Azza wa Jal has, where Allah Azza wa Jal has written, and it will never change. And in most likelihood, this is not the pen that Prophet Muhammad heard writing. And there is a different type of qadr where the qadr is taken by the angels, and the angels make it happen. Okay, so that is in all likelihood what has happened, and it appears to make sense because then both narrations make sense. Okay. Anyways, but now, either way, the point is Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is rising to a point where no other creation has ever risen up. Now, in this, around the span of time, at Sidratul Muntaha, and as all of these descriptions are being given, we don't really know what really took place, except that we know that Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was given three things. So we're given this in an authentic hadith. فأعطي رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ثلاثة، أعطي الصلوات الخمس، وأعطي خواتيم سورة البقرة، وغفر لمن لا يشرك بالله من أمته شيئا المقحمات. So he says three things have been given to Prophet Muhammad صلى الله عليه وسلم around this period of time. One of them is the 5 daily prayers, and we're going to discuss that in a second. The other is Khawatim Surah Al-Baqarah, the conclusion of Surah Al-Baqarah, the last two verses. We're going to talk about this in a second as well. And the promise that whoever worships Allah without associating partners with Him will be forgiven. So it's a promise of forgiveness. Now, of course, the last two verses of Surah Al-Baqarah, they have a special place in the Quran compared to all the verses in the Quran, because all the verses in the Quran came down on earth. Jibreel would come down and bring them down to earth, and he would recite them upon Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, whereas these last two verses were given up above the seventh heaven. So they have a special ranking, and we know, of course, from other hadith that whoever recites these two verses before going to bed at night, we are told, kafatah, they will be sufficient for him. Now, what does they will be sufficient for him mean? We're not really told what that means. And so different scholars, they give different interpretations. Some say that that will be enough for him. It will be enough protection for him. Some say that he's going to get enough reward. So Allahu Alam. But either way, it's something good. So don't forget to recite the last two verses of Surah Al-Baqarah before you go to bed at night. Now, I guess I do have to mention this point as well, because for some of us who do read other hadith, we might find there's another hadith which implies that the last two verses of Surah Al-Baqarah came down in Medina. And in fact, Surah Al-Baqarah, is it a Makki surah or is it a Madani surah? Madani surah. The Madani surah, it came down in Medina. Right now, are we in Medina? We're in Mecca. So how are we now being given the verses of Surah Al-Baqarah even though there's no Surah Al-Baqarah? So this created a little bit of a difference between scholars. So I'm not going to, again, go through the different narrations, but there is a hadith, there's an authentic hadith in Sahih Muslim, and it says that there was an angel that never ever descended before. One time he descended upon Prophet Muhammad ﷺ in Medina, and he says that I am giving you glad tidings of the last two verses of Surah Al-Baqarah. And so he gave him the last two verses. So is it this or is it that? So some scholars, they reconcile this again, and they say that he was given it there and he was given it there. Some say that he was not actually given the two verses up there in the seventh heaven, above the seventh heaven. Rather, he was given the promise that he will receive these two verses. And then he actually received them in Medina. Whether it is this, whether it is that, honestly, it makes no difference to us. But just mentioning it for the sake of knowledge. After this, Sidr al-Muntaha, he ascended up, and this was now where he had Prophet Muhammad ﷺ had his private meeting with Allah Azza wa Jal. Okay. Now, what happened in this meeting and what was discussed, regardless of what you may have heard, the reality is we have no idea. No idea at all. Nothing. Not a single detail. Now, you have several narrations. You might have heard these stories before. They sound like so, what's the word here? Like mystical, and they're fun to listen to, right? So, for example, some of us might heard that as soon as he went to meet Allah Azza wa Jal, he took off his shoes, right? And then Allah Azza wa Jal would ask him, Ya Rasulullah, why do you take off your shoes? And he's like, I didn't want to be treated like Musa alayhi salam when you told him, Ikhla'an alayk, right? So this did not happen, okay? The same thing is, and this is, and even subhanAllah, this narration, it even sounds strange. And they say that Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, for him to show Allah Azza wa Jal the respect, he began by saying, التحيات لله والصلوات والطيبات. And so Allah Azza wa Jal responded, Assalamu alayka ayyuha nabi wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And so Prophet ﷺ responded, Assalamu alayna wa ala ibadillahi salihin. And then out of nowhere, the angels came and said, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Yeah, what is this? Come on, man. This is not Disney, man. Look, what is this? Astaghfirullah al-azim. So, whatever narrations you may have heard about this appointment, Allah alam, the reality is we don't really know anything except the fact that Allah Azza wa Jal ordained 50 salahs. Okay? So Prophet Muhammad ﷺ descended back. So once this meeting was over, he began coming down and he was given 50 salahs. And this is now an authentic narration. He says, ثم فرضت علي الصلاة 50 صلاة كل يوم. Imagine 50 prayers every day. That's what that was the commandment that Prophet Muhammad ﷺ received. فرجعت فمررت على موسى. So now he's saying, now خلاص, I'm making my way down. And of course, there are certain events happening as he's coming down. We're going to mention those. So he says, as I went down, I passed by Musa alayhi salam. Now Musa, as I mentioned, he's a man of experience. He knows that Musa has met with Allah Azza wa Jal before. He knows what comes out of the meetings with Allah Azza wa Jal. Musa alayhi salam, he didn't go up to the seventh heaven, but he went to the mountain of Tur. And what did Musa alayhi salam come back with? He came back with commandments for Banu Israel. So he knows that this meeting, Prophet Muhammad is going to come back with a commandment. So he's asking him, well, what's the commandment? Okay, ماذا بما أمرت. Okay, so he says, أمرت ب50 صلاة كل يوم. I've been given 50 salahs for my ummah every single day. Here Musa says, إن أمتك لا تستطيع 50 صلاة كل يوم وإني والله قد جربت الناس قبلك وعالجت بني إسرائيل أشد المعالجة فارجع إلى ربك فسأله التخفيف. That trust me, your ummah will not be able to bear 50 salahs a day. Again, subhanAllah, think 50 salahs a day. Wallahi, some of us can barely pray 5 times a day. That's how the sad reality. 50 salahs a day, good luck going to work, good luck going to school, good luck sleeping. Yani every 20 minutes, by the time you finish the first jama'ah, okay, yallah, get up, start making adhan for the next salah. You finish that jama'ah, make up the adhan for the next salah. SubhanAllah. So he's telling him, your ummah will not be able to stand 50. And I've tried it out. I'm telling you because I have experience. I tried it with Banu Israel, and I know, given my experience with the Ummah, your people will not be able to stand it. So go back to Allah Azza wa Jal and ask Him to lower this burden upon your Ummah. So, and this is a narration. This is a detail that's not mentioned in an authentic narration, but it mentions that Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, before he went, he looked at Jibreel as if he's looking for approval. Like, is it appropriate for me to go back up? And Jibreel nods. And so, subhanAllah, yani, despite Musa being who he is, Prophet Muhammad ﷺ thought, let me just get a second opinion. So he goes back up. And now I'm just going to quickly summarize because hadith literally continues and it repeats it literally like 5 to 10 times. Okay, that he went back up to Allah Azza wa Jal, and then he came back down, and then he would say, Musa would ask him, what did Allah give you? He says 45 salahs. In another narration, he would say 40 salahs. So in one narration, it mentions that the salahs went down 5 by 5 by 5. So it was 50, then 45, then 40. Some mention that it was 50, then 40, then 30. So whatever it is, okay. The point is he kept going back and forth. And every time Musa would ask him, what did Allah give you? He'd say 45 salahs. No, that's too much for your ummah. Go back, ask Allah to reduce it. So he go back up and go back down and go back up and go back down until it went down to 5 salahs. Now, when it came back to 5 salahs, Musa alayhi salam asked him, what did Allah Azza wa Jal command you with? And he says, He has commanded for my ummah 5 prayers. What did Musa say? Go back again. Okay, go back again, because I have experience with the Banu Israel and I know what an ummah is like. And trust me, your ummah will not be able to handle 5 salahs. And so Prophet Muhammad says, "Inni qad amdaytu." سألت ربي حتى استحييت. And subhanallah, I've went back and forth so much that now I'm embarrassed now. خلاص, I'm not going to go back anymore. ولكني أرضى وأسلم. خلاص, I submit to Allah Azza wa Jalla and I'm happy with what I have. And as soon as he said this, a voice called, and this is of course the voice of Allah Azza wa Jalla, إني قد أمضيت فريضتي وخففت عن عبادي وأجزي الحسنة عشرة. That my faridah, خلاص, that it has been established, and I've made things easy for my slaves, and I have even given them an added bonus that every hasana will be rewarded with 10. So meaning, you pray 5 salahs, but you get rewarded with 50 salahs. Subhanallah. So isn't it a little bit sad that some of us, or some of the people that we know, can barely make the 5 prayers a day, and perhaps they may not even make the 5 prayers a day. So subhanallah. Now, why all of this? Like, why is this happening? Why not just say in the first place 5, just 5 rak'ahs, 5 salahs in the first from beginning, without having him to make it 50 and then coming back and back and forth. And some of us, subhanAllah, might even go like, oh, why didn't he just go back up and reduce it from 5 to something else? SubhanAllah. What can I tell you? SubhanAllah. Now, definitely Allah knows everything, so He knew beforehand that He will decree it as 5. Okay. Now, why did He make it as 50 and then reduce it to 5? Well, first of all, so that we can appreciate the mercy of Allah Azza wa Jal. So that we can see that if Allah Azza wa Jal had wanted, our lives would have been unbearable. Our lives would have been 50 salahs. Can you imagine? That would have been the expectation, and you would have been sinful if you missed any one of these 50 salahs. But Allah wants ease for you, and Allah is merciful to His creation, and so Allah is showing us that He could have made it 50, but out of mercy He brought it down to 5 as well. And it's almost like Allah Azza wa Jal, He is setting the bar. Okay, that He is setting the expectation. So the lowest bar, 5 prayers. You want the bare minimum? 5 prayers. You want to go above and beyond? 50 was what was originally expected of you. And subhanAllah, if you look at the life of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, you would find overall that he would pray 50, not prayers, but 50 rak'ahs every day. And I did the math ahead of time so that you know how to do it. 17 rak'ahs of fard prayer, okay? 12 rak'ahs of sunnah prayers, before Fajr and after Dhuhr, before Dhuhr and whatnot. 13 rak'ahs of tahajjud. So 11 tahajjud and then 10 tahajjud and then shafa and then witr, right? So 10 plus 3, 13. And then duha prayer, he would pray 8 rak'ahs. These are like every day he would pray them. And this is not including things like tahiyyat al-masjid, things like istikhara, things like whatever nawafil. So subhanallah. Given now all these details that we have learned, if we now go and open the Quran to Surah An-Najm, and if you open, and I encourage you to do this when you go home or something, to open the translation of Surah An-Najm, you will find that now it makes sense. The first page of Surah An-Najm, it will now make sense because now you know what it's talking about. وَلَقَدْ رَآهُ نَزْلَةً أُخْرَى. He saw him another time, Jibreel alayhi salam. عند سدرة المنتهى, at سدرة المنتهى. Now you know what سدرة المنتهى. عندها جنة المأوى. That near سدرة المنتهى is where the Jannah is, and we're going to talk about Jannah in a second. إذ يغشى السدرة ما يغشى. When the sidra was covered with whatever it was covered, ما زاغ البصر وما طغى. The eyesight did not falter, neither did it overstep. It absorbed everything that it saw. لقد رأى من آيات ربه الكبرى. He saw one of his Lord's greatest signs. So, at this point, as I mentioned, this is now the descending. So, khalas, the primary event of Al-Mir'aj is now complete. And that's the divine appointment with Allah Azza wa Jal. So now he is descending. As he is descending, we're going to now mention some details about things that Prophet Muhammad ﷺ saw as he's going down. Things like, for example, descriptions of Jannah, descriptions of Jahannam, other things. And now, why does it make sense that these are happening now as he is going down? Very simple. Because it's not appropriate that Prophet Muhammad ﷺ would go, quote unquote, sightseeing in the heavens before he goes and meets Allah Azza wa Jal. And it works the same way here in our world as well. When a VIP member needs to meet a member of the ministry or the government or whatever, they go to that meeting first, and then whatever, okay, and then in the night, whatever, hotels, entertainment, sightseeing, whatever, right? So, anyhow, we are told of an incident. This is narrated by Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu. أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لما أسري به مرت به رائحة طيبة. That on the night of Al-Isra, basically, or during the Mir'aj, he smelled a very sweet fragrance. Something smelled really nice. So he says, um, sorry. He asks Jibril, ما هذه الرائحة؟ قال ماشطة ابنة فرعون. What is the smell? This is the smell of the woman that used to comb the hair of the daughter of Fir'aun. Who is this lady? We have no idea. So you know Fir'aun? He had a daughter. The servant of Fir'aun who used to comb the hair of a daughter, he was saying that this is what the fragrant smell is. Subhanallah. So what did she do? Prophet Muhammad, he literally asked, like, why am I smelling her smell? Like, what did she do to deserve this kind of honor? So Jibreel explains, كانت تمشطها فوقع المشط من يدها. One day she was combing the hair of the daughter of Fir'aun, and she dropped the comb. And so she bent down to grab it, and she says, Bismillah. And so the daughter of Fir'aun, she hears this, and she says, you mean Abi? You mean my father? Like in the name of my father. And so she says, Bal Rabbi wa Rabbu Abiki. Rather, this is my Rabb and the Rabb of your father. So the daughter says, I'm going to tell my father. I'm going to tell my dad. So she says, you can go ahead and do whatever you want. So Fir'aun found out. And Fir'aun brought forth this woman, and he asked her, Man Rabbuki? Who is your Lord? And so she says, Rabbi wa Rabbuka Allahu alladhi fis sama. My Lord and your Lord is one, and that's Allah Azza wa Jalla. And so Fir'aun ordered that, he brought, a clump of metal, and it was melted. Okay, so there was a boiling mixture. Okay, and he ordered that this lady and her children, she had children, and she had an infant, and he ordered that one by one her children would be thrown into this, unless of course she goes back on her word. And so, given this challenge, she responds to Fir'aun. She says, I only have one request. He says, what is it? She says that when you finish throwing us in, take our bones and bury us together. And so he says, very well. And so one by one, in front of this mother, her own children, one by one were being thrown. Of course, every time one is thrown, they would look at her, who is your Lord? My Lord is Allah. Throw the next one, throw the next one. Until the last one that was left was a little baby, an infant, a radi'a. And this one was the one whom she paused and hesitated at. And subhanAllah, this is her own baby. And so she felt emotional, and she didn't have the heart to see her own baby being thrown. And at this, Allah Azza wa Jal allowed the baby to speak. And He said, Isbiri ya ummah fa innaki ala al-haq. Be patient, O my mother, because you are upon the truth. And at this, the baby was dropped, and then she was dropped after the baby. And subhanAllah, so this is probably a story that is happening thousands of years ago or something. And we have no idea who this lady is. And none of the prophets ever found out who this lady is, yet she is now being reintroduced to Prophet Muhammad SAW, even though we still don't know her name. Yet her story and legacy continues to this day. And we know of her story that somewhere up there, there is the Mashita of Bint Fir'aun, who has the honor of who had the honor of Prophet Muhammad SAW smelling her smell as he is being shown all of these miracles. Also, in the authentic hadith of Anas ibn Malik, after the salah, so he says, after the salah has been prescribed to me, udkhiltul jannah. I was allowed to enter Jannah. And keep in mind, when he says, I entered Jannah, or I entered this and I saw this, this and that, he's not necessarily completely entering into the full Jannah, because Jannah has things which eyes have never seen, sounds that ears have never heard, and things that people have never imagined. So he's being shown the outskirts of Jannah. Okay, so it's the same Jannah, it's the actual Jannah, but it's the outskirts. It's not the full, and it's the trial version, not the full version. Okay, that's whatever you want to call it. So he says, I saw Jannah فإذا فيها جنابذ اللؤلؤ. I saw in it domes, like large domes, buildings made out of pearls. وإذا تربتها المسك, and the soil was made out of musk, out of misk. And in another authentic hadith, he says, بينما أنا أسير في الجنة إذا أنا بنهر حافتاه قباب الدر المجوف. So he says, while I was walking in Jannah on the night of Mir'aj, basically, I saw a river on which, at the edges of each, and basically on the banks of this river, I saw there were tents that were made out of pearls as well. So he says, I asked Jibreel, ما هذا يا Jibreel? What is this, O Jibreel? And he says, هذا الكوثر الذي أعطاك ربك. This is the river of Al-Kawthar, which Allah Azza wa Jal has given you. فإذا طينه مسك أذفر. That the mud of this river is a very strongly scented misk. This is the Kawthar of Al-Jannah. It is also mentioned that, and this is probably something that's happening throughout this whole miracle, not just right now, as he's going up and as he's going down, that as whenever Prophet Muhammad SAW came across any angel, he would give salam to them, and those angels would respond back to him. You can imagine, he's now a VIP member who is being allowed to enter into the heavens, and all the angels are flocking towards him, and they're happy to see him, and they're giving him salam, and so they're all excited, except for one angel who responded to the salam, but he was not excited nor he was smiling. So he says, Man hada ya Jibreel? Who is that one angel who appears to be very sad and gloomy? And so Jibreel says, Hada Malik Khazinun Nar. This is Malik, the gatekeeper of Jahannam. ما ضحك منذ أن خلق الله النار. He has never smiled or laughed ever since Jahannam was created. So ever since Malik was associated with Jahannam, and ever since he saw Jahannam, subhanAllah, he would never smile after this. But then in another different narration, he had something beautiful, and he says, Jibreel is saying, but were he to smile for anyone, he would have smiled for you. So he doesn't smile for anybody, don't worry, don't feel bad. But if he were to smile for anyone, he would have definitely smiled for you. So Prophet Muhammad saw Jannah, and he also saw Jahannam, and he saw the punishment of Jahannam. Ibn Ishaq mentions in his book, and Allahu Alam, regarding the authenticity of this narration, that he asked Malik to show him the hellfire. And so when he opened the gates of Jahannam, I think it's the Adhan, right? Yes, the Adhan, okay. So as soon as as soon as Malik opens the gates of Jahannam, the narration mentions that Jahannam, comes out. Basically, it barges out, and it was about to consume everything that Prophet Muhammad SAW saw, until he tells Malik, "Oh Malik, put it back in its place, and so Jahannam was put back in its place. So Allahu Alam whether this is correct or not, يعني, بس it does seem to match with some things that the Quran mentions, وَبُرِّزَتِ الْجَحِيمُ لِلْغَاوِينَ وَبُرِّزَتِ الْجَحِيمُ لِمَنْ يَرَى. It's going to come out of its place. Okay. He also saw the punishment of the people of Jahannam. And all of these, what I'm going to mention, are authentic narrations, inshallah. And in every one of these, basically, Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he would see a group of people, and he would ask Jibreel, Jibreel, who are these group of people? And Jibreel would explain. So, for example, he says, رأيت رجالا لهم مشافر كمشافر الإبل في أيديهم قطع من نار كالأفهار يقذفونها في أفواههم فتخرج من أدبارهم. I saw a group of people. These people had noses like the noses of Ibn, like big noses like camels. So they had disfigured faces, basically. And they would be eating coals made from Jahannam, and they would eat and swallow these coals, and it would come back from their behinds. And so I asked Jibreel, oh Jibreel, who are these people? He says, هؤلاء أكلة أموال اليتامى ظلما. Those are the people who used to steal the orphan's money and take away what's the right, take away the right of the orphan. In another narration, he mentions, مررت بقوم لهم أظفار من نحاس يخمشون وجوههم وصدورهم. I saw people, they had nails made out of, long nails made out of copper, long sharp nails, and they're scratching their faces and they're scratching their chests with these nails. So he says, who are these people, O Jibreel? He says, هؤلاء الذين يأكلون لحوم الناس ويقعون في أعراضهم. Those are the people who used to backbite all the time, who used to involve themselves with things that are none of their business. They would involve themselves with people for gossip, for the sake of gossip, speaking about people badly behind their backs. He also says, رأيت رجالا بين أيديهم لحم ثمين طيب إلى جنبه لحم غث منتن يأكلون من الغث المنتن ويتركون السمين الطيب. I saw people, in front of them they had two piles of meat. One of them was pure and fresh meat, and the other was vile and rotten meat. And they would leave the fresh meat and they would eat from that rotten meat. And so I asked, who are these people? He says, هؤلاء الذين يتركون ما أحل الله لهم من النساء ويذهبون إلى ما حرم الله عليهم منهن. These are the people who used to basically commit zina. These are the people who would leave, the men or women whom Allah Azza wa Jal made halal for them, and they would go and seek out the haram instead. ثم رأيت رجالا, another narration, رأيت رجالا لهم بطون لم أر مثلها قط يمرون عليهم بسبيل آل فرعون يمرون عليهم كالإبل المهيومة حين يعرضون على النار. So I saw people with very large bellies. I've never seen people like this before. Very, very large bellies to the point where they cannot move. And there were animals that were being brought over and they would trample over them. So they would run them over. And so he says, who are these people? He says, هؤلاء أكلة الربا. Those are the people who used to deal with interest, to benefit from interest and take interest. Also, he says, ورأى أقواما تقطع ألسنتهم وشفاههم بمقاريض من نار. So he says, I saw people who had scissors made out of fire, and they would be cutting their own tongues and their own lips. And subhanAllah, this one is, may Allah protect us from this one. Who are these people? He says, those are the people, خطباء أمتك من أهل الدنيا. Those are the people who used to be your imams, who used to come and teach you and lecture you about things. كانوا يأمرون الناس بالبر وينسون أنفسهم. Where they would tell the people, do the good, avoid the sins, and they would not do the good, and they would do the sins. And may Allah protect me and protect everyone from falling into this category. So these are the descriptions that we have of the punishments of the people of Jahannam. There's some more things we want to talk about, but I don't want to rush it, so I'll probably just leave it till next time. So at this point, Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, this is now where the descent is basically taking place. He's making his way back down to make Bayt al-Maqdis, and then he's going to come back to Jerusalem, right? He's going to ride al-Buraq again, and he's going to go back to, sorry, not to Jerusalem, he's going to go back to, from Jerusalem back to Mecca, riding al-Buraq, and then he is going to face a very big problem, and that's inshallah what's going to be the main topic for next week, and that is, what am I going to tell people now? I was in Mecca, I was sleeping, and then I went to Masjid Bayt al-Maqdis, and then I went to the heavens, and I saw Adam, and I saw this, and I saw that, and I saw, how am I going to tell people all this? Who's going to believe me? And even amongst the Muslims, what? This is like now, subhanallah. So how did he approach the people, and how did he tell them? Inshallah, that's what we will discuss next week, bi'idhnillah. So next week, the time change will happen next week, right? Or is it the week after? Next week. So Sunday is the actual time change, and then, okay, so most likely, this is not confirmed, but most likely what will happen, from my recollection of previous years, the Isha Iqama will be fixed at 8 p.m. And so most likely we'll have the actual Seerah class an hour before Isha Iqama, maybe around 7 p.m. So, and we'll probably just keep it fixed for the entire winter. So 7 p.m. I think that's a good time, inshallah, for everybody. Inshallah. So with that said, are there any questions? Yes. So al-azali means that it's this is the one that does not get altered, right? This is the permanent one, and there is the qadar that can get altered, that can change. Okay, so that is. So I know it might be a little bit confusing to us, and subhanallah, our minds don't have what it takes to grasp the full concept of qadar, subhanallah, because Allah Azza wa Jalla knows everything, and knows what everyone will do, and knows how everyone will end up, okay, and knows how everyone will end up, how long will everyone live. But there is a certain type of qadr which changes as well, and this is the qadr that the angels, they basically, think of it this way, okay? There's a qadr in a book that's only kept with Allah Azza wa Jal. Nobody knows about it. Nobody has access to it, not even the angels. And the angels have access to a different book, okay? And they read the qadr from it, and they make that qadr happen. That version of qadr has the ability to change, okay? So for example, dua has the ability to change qadr. Is it that qadr or this qadr? Not the qadr of Allah Azza wa Jalla, the azali. That one khalas is pre-written. Allah knows what dua you're going to make, and Allah has already decreed everything. But the angels might change some things, okay? So someone made a dua. That dua got accepted by Allah Azza wa Jal, and Allah Azza wa Jal ordered the angel change that qadr that was originally brought down to you. And so the angels would execute something different. Okay, so I know it's a little bit confusing, okay, but this is what we know about qadr, subhanAllah. Any other questions? I do believe yes, it does, but it's slipping out of my mind right now. Wallahi. Any other questions? No questions. خلاص, you're done. Okay, سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. See you next week, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.